Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
My name is Mike Flanagan, and I'm of Irish descent. At least, that's what my mother tells me. My father, on the other hand, never really shared stories about our roots. I am 100% American, born and raised, far from the Irish enclaves of Boston and New York. I stand just over 6 feet tall, with dark brown hair and blue eyes, and weigh around 200 pounds. I'm not some gym rat. My physical shape comes naturally from my work in construction. I carry heavy bags of cement, lift rolls of insulation up 2 flights of stairs, haul drywall, mix cement, install insulation, hang drywall, do roofing, climb ladders, crawl under houses, and do whatever needs to be done. I'm 33 years old now, and I expect to age with arthritis, grumbling about how hard my life has been and how little physical work young people have to do these days. I've been married for 8 years to June Mullen. How we met isn't really important to this story, so let's put it this way. We met at a party, liked each other, dated a lot, had intimate a lot, fell in love, and got married. I graduated from community college with a degree in civil engineering, and I also have a second diploma as an electrician. This makes me quite popular on construction sites. I'm a top-notch electrician, so most electrical contractors hire me for the rough wiring, and then they only come in for the final installation. With the modern requirements for smart homes, everything is becoming more complicated and expensive. But I can help you save money. June graduated from a liberal arts college the year after our wedding, earning a degree in accounting. She works for a large regional company in the accounts receivable department. In the beginning, the difference in our professions, hers being white-collar and mine blue-collar, never seemed like a big deal. I attended all her social events, even showered, cut my hair, and put on my only suit so I wouldn't embarrass her. Over time, however, her colleagues began to treat me poorly. Maybe it was because I liked bottled beer a little too much, or because I was into football rather than enjoying the symphony or sipping wine. I'm not sure. I just know that after a while, no one seemed to want to talk to me at those parties. When I think back, I wonder if maybe I wasn't subtle enough for her colleagues. The wives of several of her bosses even tried to seduce me at those events, but I rejected them immediately because I am a monogamist. I don't believe in open marriages or partner swapping, and I don't use illicit substances. My beer relaxes me enough. June is about 5 feet 5 inches with gorgeous black hair, even darker than mine. Her skin is snow white, like the women of old times. Of course, she hates her pale skin and is constantly trying to tan, though, being Irish like me, we don't tan well. She has brown eyes and an hourglass figure that drives me crazy. I don't know if her breast size is a C or a D, and I don't care. June began to come home late, citing a heavy workload at work. She also started going out with her girlfriends at least once a week. She explained that she needed time for herself and to spend time with her friends. At the same time, I had a lot of work. The company I work for is building more homes than ever, thanks to the local construction boom. I'm not a foreman, but my skills are good enough that the boss wants me everywhere. So I move from one site to another, doing whatever needs to be done. On one site, I might pour concrete, turning it into a work of art, smooth as glass with a shiny surface. At another site, I might be doing framing. On another, I could be aligning cabinets and so on. Sometimes, I don't get home until after dark. In fact, I almost always come home after sunset, around 10 p.m. during the summer. I get tired and hungry, so most days I just grab fast food on the way home. June has usually already eaten, either at home alone or with her friends, and she's either getting ready for bed or already in bed when I arrive. We still make love a couple of times a week. I might be tired, but I love making love to my wife. Sometimes, she tries to discourage me, citing my fatigue, but once I start giving her pleasure, she gets involved. Yes, we have a life together, except for children. We've discussed having kids, but haven't yet decided if the time is right. Luckily, given recent events, we didn't have any innocent lives to worry about. As I mentioned, things have changed recently. June became a little moody, but I chalked it up to the long hours I've been working. History teaches that work will slow down with the onset of winter, and June knows this. But now, in the middle of summer, something is clearly bothering her. Several times, she's gone to her company events without me. In fact, I didn't even know about the latest one. One Saturday, I left work early to spend time with my wife and arrived home just in time to see her walking out, dressed for a night out. When I asked her why she was so dressed up, she answered casually, "Sorry, Mike, but this is a corporate event I have to go to. I'm fighting for a promotion and need to communicate with my superiors. I'll be back late, so don't wait for me." She didn't even invite me to quickly freshen up and go with her. A couple of minutes later, she left, and I was left alone on a Saturday evening. Though I wasn't sure if she was cheating on me, I knew for sure that we had stopped communicating. Our distance was growing, and if things didn't change soon, I saw my future as a lonely one. It's not about intimate. Hell, every time I walk into a bar, there are always women who make it clear that my male physique is in demand. What I mean is, love might be harder to find the second time around. I knew June would have no shortage of male attention, but was that what she was looking for? Had she stopped loving me? I would have to find out soon. She came home very late, even for one of her corporate events. It was about 3 a.m. when she finally returned. She immediately took off her clothes and took a long shower before carefully getting into bed. I lay on my side, not letting her know that I was watching her. Eventually, I fell asleep, though June either fell asleep or passed out. I'm not sure. I already had a plan to expose her, and I slept soundly. I woke up well after dawn the next morning. I got up, showered, shaved, and went for a long walk that lasted several hours. When I returned home, June was already awake and looked quite rested. She didn't seem drunk or high, just tired from the late night, but now she appeared alert. We spent the day quietly together, but didn't do much more than cuddle before falling asleep that night. On Monday, I decided to take half a day off. The boss wasn't happy, but after I explained that I needed to start paying closer attention to June, he quickly agreed to help. A few years ago, he himself caught his wife of 20 years in bed with a neighbor's son, and he had to endure a lot of pain while healing. He didn't want anyone to suffer the same way he had. So if I could start communicating with June now, instead of waiting until it was too late, he was all for it. I stopped by June's office, but she wasn't there, and no one knew where she was. I could have spent my time driving around to every motel and hotel in the area trying to find her car, but I decided to go home and wait for her. We would figure out what was going on in our marriage. When I arrived home, June's car was in the driveway. At least I knew where she was. I entered the house expecting to see my wife either in the kitchen or living room, but both rooms were empty. I walked down the hallway towards our bedroom. Maybe she was still tired from the late Saturday night and decided to take a nap. As I passed the guest bedrooms, which are always ready for relatives or friends who might visit, I noticed they were empty. No one had come over recently, but I heard noise from the master bedroom. My feeling of anxiety intensified. I've heard many stories of marriages shattering when one spouse came home early and caught the other in the act of infidelity. I admit, I stood there for a long time before deciding to open the door, which was almost closed but not locked. I tried to convince myself that June had simply turned on the TV and was listening to it loudly, or that she was talking on the phone. I could stand there and lie to myself for a long time, but that's not my way of handling conflicts or problems. I considered not opening the door. I could have continued lying to myself, making excuses, and remaining in the dark about how June truly felt about me and our marriage. But ignoring the problem is like neglecting a bad foundation. Over time, the whole structure will collapse. I couldn't ignore it. My self-esteem also wouldn't allow me to quietly leave with my tail between my legs, licking my wounds alone like a wounded animal. No, I was the owner of this house, and any stranger who had the audacity to destroy or steal from it had to be punished. Yes, modern women might claim their bodies belong only to them, not to their husbands. But these same women often believe their partner's thoughts, actions, and body are their property. It's a two-way street. Trust and fidelity form the foundation on which love is built, like a road. Respect also plays an essential role. When trust, faith, or respect are lost, holes appear in the road, and no one believes in it anymore. I seriously considered grabbing a gun, but it was in the nightstand, and I didn't want to resort to a shotgun or rifle inside the house. No, I decided I needed to act quickly and decisively. I want to make it clear that I am not some ninja or martial artist. I didn't serve in the special forces, nor was I a government contractor. I never took up boxing or street fighting. In school, I played football and wrestled a bit. I didn't make it to the state championships, but every opponent knew that when they faced me, they were in for a tough fight. I rarely got pinned to the mat, and most of the time, I only lost by a small margin of points. I say all this to explain what happened when I entered the bedroom. I opened the door a crack and saw June lying on her back in the center of our large bed, her legs raised. She was wild, no longer deserving of any respect. Her lover was blonde and appeared well-built. My rage grew. I rarely lose control completely, but I have a terrible temper. My school years were filled with angry outbursts. One day, my father simply hugged me and didn't let go until I calmed down. Nothing else worked. No punishments, no shouting, no house arrest. Even taking a pause didn't help, but my dad, who almost never showed affection in public, just held me and told me how much he loved me and how hurt it made him to see me like that. Now, I felt everything around me turning red. Apparently, I really do have a drop of berserker blood in my veins. There's an ancient legend about warriors who lose all control, destroying everything in their path, ignoring even mortal wounds, and continuing the fight until their last drop of blood, whether their own or the enemy's. Now, I felt that fury within me. I opened the door as quickly as I could and rushed into the room. I aimed for the spot right behind that blonde idiot ear and punched him with all my might. Almost the entire weight of my 95 kilograms was invested in the blow. I was once told that you should not just hit the target, but aim to hit through it. I imagined my hand passing through his head and reaching the wall, about 2 meters further. I wanted him to feel me, and this wall did. Did I mention that I'm a nail hammerer by profession? Hitting a nail accurately requires excellent eye-hand coordination. I hit exactly where I aimed. The idiot let out a weak groan as he lost consciousness and almost flew out of June. He didn't quite make it to the wall, but his body stretched and went limp from the impact. I think June didn't like this. As her legs twisted, she suddenly jerked to the side, and she immediately curled up in pain, screamed softly. I don't think she even realized what had happened. Damn, I was tougher than I thought. I had never planned on dealing with my wife after hitting her lover, but both of them were already incapacitated. I stood there, trying to catch my breath and collect my thoughts. Then the question arose, what should I do next? It seemed like I stood there forever, but in reality, only a few seconds passed before a plan began to form in my head. I wasn't done with the one who ruined my life. Perhaps June would get her punishment later, but this guy shouldn't get away with it. He was unconscious, so I checked his condition. His breathing was even and calm. I remembered a paramedic friend telling me to always watch for ragged breathing in unconscious people, as it could indicate brain problems. This idiot was fine, his breathing and pulse were normal. Now, I turned my attention to June. She was still writhing on the bed, screamed in pain, not really paying attention to me or her lover. I had to take advantage of the moment while she was unable to resist. When we bought our bedroom furniture, June insisted on having a traditional-style dressing table with a large round mirror and a small upholstered chair. The mirror was illuminated, unlike vintage models, so she could sit and apply makeup and style her hair before going out. This allowed me to use the bathroom, since we only had one sink. I grabbed a chair and a pair of ties that she had insisted on giving me for every birthday and Christmas. Seriously, who gives a tie to a man who never wears a suit? This was another sign that she was thinking about me. June screamed again as I picked her up and sat her on the chair, straddling her. I quickly tied her hands to the back of the chair and her legs to the chair's legs so that she couldn't stand up or move. I had just hit the man she invited into our home and tied her up. I'll probably go to jail, so I didn't care about her reaction. She began to realize something was wrong in our bedroom. Her eyes cleared, and she saw her loving husband standing before her, fully dressed, while she was completely without anything. She tried to cover herself. I remember laughing when I saw my wife of 8 years suddenly feel ashamed in front of me. Her attempts to cover herself were unsuccessful, as her hands were tightly bound. Then she started speaking. "Mike, what's going on? What are you doing here so early? Why am I tied to this chair?" I didn't answer because I was still thinking about what to do with this blonde idiot before he regained consciousness. I remember giving her such a look that she fell silent. It seemed she even shrank a little under my gaze. I grabbed the blonde by the shoulder and dragged him back onto the bed. He was a big guy, probably close to my size, but I lift heavy things every day, so it wasn't a problem for me. I wasn't very gentle when I dragged him onto the bed. I placed the large pillow that June always put between us at night under his belly. I laid him down, tying his hands with another pair of ties from June to the head of the bed. This blonde, like me, turned out to be quite hairy. Apparently, June liked strong and hairy men. I'll have to ask her later how she chooses her lovers. June was still trying to move, though it was obvious she was in pain. But that didn't stop her from continuing to fire off questions and comments. When did you get back, dear? This isn't what it seems. I can explain everything. Please untie me so we can talk like rational adults. How's Pete doing? Now I know his name is Pete. I replied, well, Pete isn't really in the mood to talk right now. It seems like you really tired him out, and now he's fast asleep. What did you do with him? You know, I came home early hoping to see my wife, and I found a stranger here who took what belongs to me. He didn't bother asking permission to take what's mine. I consider him a thief, the lowest kind of thief. He didn't steal something that could be easily replaced. No, he stole something of the highest value to me, and he must pay for it. What are you talking about? She asked. I answered, he didn't take anything of ours. June, your short memory surprises me. You always remember everything that happened to us 8 years ago. You stood before the altar and gave yourself to me. I gave myself to you too. Therefore, your heart, soul, and body belong to me, just as my heart, soul, and body belong to you. You cannot give away what already belongs to another, just as I cannot give away what is mine. She tried to argue, saying her body belonged only to her, but I reminded her of our marriage vows, which she had written herself. She promised to give herself to me, and she agreed to this in front of more than 200 witnesses. I intend to adhere to the terms of this agreement. Of course, she didn't like it and began arguing again. Then, for the first time in our marriage, I shouted, June, listen to me and shut up. I shouted so loudly that she froze, shocked by my anger. I lowered my voice a little. If you don't shut up, I'll have to shut you up. I'm already going to jail for assault and unlawful detainment of you and your lover. If I add a few more accusations to this, nothing will change except that I will no longer hear the nonsense you spew. I gave her a few seconds to think about my words. So, will you shut up, or should I shut you up? She opened her mouth but said nothing, comprehending her situation. Here she was, in our bedroom, her lover tied to the bed and she tied to a chair. She wasn't completely helpless, but words certainly couldn't help her now. Wisely deciding not to argue, she nodded. Okay, now you can only speak to answer my questions. Understood. She nodded again. I checked on Pete. He was still unconscious, breathing steadily, and his pulse was normal. I sat on the edge of the bed and turned to face my unfaithful wife. It was time to get to the questions. First of all, how long have you been deceiving me? She responded quickly. Today was the first time. I've never done this before. It's a pity, but I didn't believe her. I don't believe a word you say, I retorted. In my opinion, it looks like you and Pete have been at this for a while. We've been married for 8 years, and you've always refused to try anything new in our relationship. Yet here I find you in the middle of this with him. She lowered her head. We've been dating for 2 months. So, you mean to say you've been having intimate for 2 months? I asked, and she nodded. I won't ask how it started. I don't care, I continued, my voice growing colder. If you fell in love with him and stopped loving me, why didn't you just tell me the truth? But I love you, not him, she tried to explain, but I couldn't help but laugh. I don't think she found the situation funny, but I was far from in the mood for humor. I think the standard response in cases like this is, it's a strange way to show love, isn't it? I said, cutting her off. She tried to justify herself again. I really love you. It didn't mean anything. I smirked. How would you like this scenario? You come home and find me in bed with some blonde with breasts even bigger than yours. Would you believe me if I said it was just a one-time thing, that it didn't mean anything, and that I love you and never meant to hurt you? She shook her head without looking at me. Then we're in agreement, right? I continued, my voice sharp. You openly have intimate with your lover in my bed, in my house, giving him my body, and you expect me to say, okay, honey, it's fine, and continue with my life as if nothing happened? I looked at her challengingly, waiting for her to object, to offer me more empty promises, but she wisely remained silent. She shook her head again. What a hypocritical creature you are, I muttered, as Pete began to stir his stream softly. I needed to do something about his legs, which were still loose. I didn't have any more ties, so I used the fabric sashes from June's and my dressing gowns to bind his legs together, bending them at the knees. This raised his hairy backside higher into the air. What a pitiful sight it was. I doubted this idiot ever imagined himself in such a humiliating position. Then it dawned on me. I had to make sure this humiliation was documented. I went to the hallway closet, grabbed the camera, and took a few pictures of June and Pete. Then I remembered the old video camera with a cassette. It should still work, especially if I connected the charger. I set up the camera on a tripod, next to June, pointing it at the bed. Whatever I decided to do with Pete, it would be captured from her perspective. I needed this documentation to add to their humiliation. I turned on the video camera and left it running. Each tape was supposed to record about an hour of video, and I didn't expect it to take me longer than that to exact my revenge. Turning to June, I suddenly remembered one of her fantasies. I think you once told me that your fantasy was to see me have intimate with another man, right? She looked at me in surprise, not immediately answering. Finally, she nodded. Then another thought struck me. This isn't your fantasy, is it? It's his. Pete wanted me in the same position he's in right now, right? For me to be passive. I paused for a moment, thinking. So Pete is the so-called bull, right? A look of despair crossed her face, but in the end, she nodded, trying to explain. I didn't want to see him humiliate you. I just got turned on by the idea of two men together. It's a pretty common female fantasy, just like men with two women. But when I brought it up, you immediately shut it down, so I told Pete you weren't interested. He didn't bring it up again. Pete was now starting to regain consciousness, attempting to free himself. With his legs bound and his arms stretched above his head, he had no leverage. His movements looked a little obscene, like he was trying to show off his backside. He started to shout, "What's going on? What did you do to me, idiot?" The insults kept coming. "Untie me, you coward. I'll show you who the real man is. I've been sleeping with your wife for weeks now. In your bed. How do you like that, huh?" I just shrugged at June. She remained silent, wisely not trying to intervene. I endured his verbal abuse for a while, but he quickly grew tiresome. All he could do was talk, and it was time to shut him up. Then I remembered something. My beloved wife had ordered some items online, and it dawned on me. She and that rotten idiot were planning something against me. She bought gags, clamps, and other bondage accessories. When she showed them to me, I asked if she wanted me to use them on her, but she was insistent, saying they were for her. I quickly dismissed the idea, and she didn't bring it up again. But now, I could imagine how she would have used bondage to set me up with Pete. What a thought. I rummaged through the box where she had stored the items. At least she hadn't unpacked everything. But if these things had appeared ready to use, I would have completely believed she was planning to make me the victim. One of the gags was a ring of some kind. It went into the mouth, holding it open. It prevented speech without suffocating. Perfect for her boyfriend. I tore open the package and took out the gag, making sure Pete saw. His eyes widened, and he started to mumble threats, begging as I approached him. But suddenly he fell silent, pressing his lips tightly together. I decided to tease him. "Come on, Pete. Be a good guy. I know you and June are conspiring to cuckold me. Isn't it only fair to try it on you first? If I see how you handle it, maybe, just maybe, I'll let you do the same to me." Pete spat out his response. "I'm not some sub. I'm the alpha male here. You're just a doormat." I smirked, hearing that, and took the opportunity to grab his nostrils and force the ring into his mouth. He tried to turn his head, but I held his nose tightly. If he jerked too hard, I could have broken his septum. His lips pursed again, but it seemed he damaged his teeth on the metal. When he howled, his mouth opened, and only sounds escaped. "I can handle this," he muttered, his tongue moving around the ring, likely trying to find a way to get rid of it. I walked away a few steps, then turned to June. "You know, June, men don't turn me on at all. Pete might work out a lot and be attractive to women, but to me, he's nothing. I don't even get a hint of arousal when I'm with him." Pete seemed to like this, as he suddenly went quiet. I continued. "Even though I feel nothing but anger and hatred for Pete, I believe he needs to learn why he shouldn't sleep with another man's wife. I could shoot him or beat him senseless, but that wouldn't teach him anything." I paused, allowing those words to sink into their minds. I took a step back and examined my victim. "June, you know, I might have trouble staying aroused with all this body hair," I said, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "Is that what attracted you to him? Because he has more body hair than me?" June shook her head, but I wasn't done. "I really want to understand what made you sleep with him. Did I fail you somehow? Was it my fault? If you can't answer my questions, then I don't know how we'll get through this." I turned away from her, then grabbed the shaving gel and June's disposable razors. I didn't want to use my own razor for this job, so I used the one she had bought. The process wasn't pleasant, but I forced myself to finish it. After I was done, I glanced at Pete's neglected area. It was clear he had once taken care of himself, but recently had given up. Perhaps he thought, since June was already his, there was no need to bother anymore. I admit, even I can understand that the grooming at the start of their intense romance likely contributed to him regaining my courage. With newfound determination, I set to work, no matter how unpleasant the task was for me. The end justifies the means. The entire process of organizing things took only a little time, and when I finally finished, I stepped back to evaluate the result. Yes, that's quite enough. Now let him try to explain to his wife or at the gym why he suddenly decided to give himself such a radical transformation. I glanced at June. Is this idiot married? She nodded. I chuckled. Well, it won't be easy for him to explain when he gets home. An idea struck me. I took a new razor and quickly shaved a stripe down his back. Once I was done, I stepped back and observed the result. Yes, it looked good, but something more was needed. I paused the video recording, contemplating what to do next. I decided against painting, it might smudge. I resumed recording and retrieved Pete's belt from his discarded trousers, showing it to him. Pete, not many people know this about me. I began, but my father once whipped me with a belt when I was a child for lying. He taught me that lying was the worst sin a person could commit, and I agree with him. Those who lie to me receive very little respect. June will soon understand this. I paused, letting the words sink in. You've never lied to me, I continued, my voice cold. But you stole something valuable from me, showed me no respect, and therefore, you will be punished. Once the punishment is over, I'll release you back to your foolish wife and family. You can try to forget this lesson, but I have a feeling you'll remember this day, and what you did, for a long time. I looked at him with a steady gaze. By the way, my father forgot his belt the day he punished me. So, he made me take off my own belt and used it on me. I paused again, letting the weight of my words linger in the air. Think about it, I said. Here I am, being punished not by my father's belt, but by my own. It's my name on it. I nearly threw this belt away after that day. But now, you'll understand what it feels like to receive a lash from your own belt for something you've done yourself. His eyes filled with tears as he looked at me, and I glanced at June. She was crying too. I had never told her this story. Well, let's continue the lesson, I said, waving my hand dismissively. I swung the belt and struck his backside. He screamed through his gag as the belt smacked against him. Again, I swung, hitting him over and over. His fifth place turned red, then became even brighter, if that was even possible. I gave him no more than 10 blows before I threw the belt onto his discarded trousers. I didn't want to cause any cuts, and more strikes would have resulted in wounds. He cried in pain, and June looked shocked. I had never lost control like this before. She must have thought of me as some sort of monster. Well, the monster was unleashed, but I was no longer a berserker. No, this was more like Mr. Hyde than the Hulk. I was cool and calculating in my madness. I took my pound of flesh and savored every bit of it. I undressed, anticipating the climax of the evening. Pete looked out of place, to put it mildly. Of course, not by his own choice. When you do something behind someone's back, like trying to seduce someone's wife, you usually don't expect to be caught red-handed and put in this position. But here he sat, not at a bar with a cocktail, but in a locked room with a gag in his mouth. Yes, Pete, that's right, I said. Today, you'll have to remain silent. His eyes darted around the room as if looking for an escape, or perhaps hoping for a camera crew to appear, revealing it was all just a joke. But no, Pete, no cameras, no host today, just you, me, and your failed attempt to be the hero of someone else's drama. I stood, keeping my distance. Everything inside me was boiling. My gaze slid from one object to another, like an intense scene in a thriller where everything is about to explode. But what was most interesting was that there was no explosion. I held myself together, despite feeling the fire building inside me with each breath. Yes, anger is like gasoline. You don't want to spill it unless you want to burn the whole city down. Okay, Pete, I thought to myself, you probably didn't expect it to end like this. Pete remained silent, and his silence suited me. There's something very symbolic about how people who were once loud in their actions become quiet when they can no longer talk their way out of it. Sitting next to me was June, my so-called dear wife. Oh, June, you hid all of this so carefully, and now you're sitting here, constrained, not just physically, but mentally as well. Perhaps she hoped I would never find out. Or maybe she thought I would be so naive I'd turn a blind eye and continue living in blissful ignorance. Huh, great plan, but it failed miserably. I slowly, almost lazily, turned toward her. She sat in the chair, her face impassive, but her eyes betrayed her. There was a slight, almost imperceptible tremor in them. It was the same look a person has when they realize they've been caught red-handed but still try to hold on, to maintain even a shred of control. Seriously, June, I spoke slowly, dragging out each word as if savoring every moment. Do you really think this will work? She glanced at Pete, but her gaze was intense, unwilling to meet his eyes for too long. I knew she didn't want to acknowledge him because doing so would mean admitting what she had done, and she didn't want that. Your hero, I continued, mocking him just a little. The one you chose instead of me. I deliberately added more contempt to my voice, as if playing with her emotions like a cat with a mouse. However, the mouse was no longer moving. She was frozen. June stayed silent, but her silence spoke louder than any words. I could see how she was trying to gather her thoughts, how desperately she clung to whatever little control she thought she still had. She wanted to regain control of the situation, but that power had long slipped away. This was no longer a game of chess. It was a stalemate, and she knew it. I looked back at Pete. He sat there, looking as though the weight of the world was on him. Well, in a way it was. He had gotten into deep trouble, and thoroughly so. Well, my friend, I thought, now you'll understand what it means to interfere in other people's affairs. It's one thing to make plans in your head, hoping everything will go according to plan, and another to find yourself trapped in a reality where everything turns into a nightmare. I moved a little closer to him, close enough for him to sense my presence, but still at a safe distance. We both knew there would be no physical violence. This was not my game. No, Pete, I'll give you something much better. True humiliation isn't a fist in the face. It's when you're cornered, with no choice but to endure and realize you've lost. Look at him, I repeated, turning to June. Well, how do you like it? What do you say, June? Silence. It was deafening. I waited for her to speak, maybe to try justifying herself or find a loophole, but no. She sat there, frozen. Well, of course, what could she say when all her cards had been taken from her and all she had left was an empty hand, too devoid of hope to matter? I then turned my attention back to June's intimate toy drawer and pulled out an interesting toy. I ignored Pete's subsequent attempts at protest. His humiliation was almost complete. I left the room for a few minutes to retrieve June's bottle of ink. She had a fondness for calligraphy and used a regular pen. I took a small brush and began painting over the shaved stripe on his back. When I finished, the word adulterer was clearly visible, written in ink that would last for several days before it began to fade. As I sat here now, writing this, I still couldn't quite understand where that sinister laugh had come from. It was a laugh I had never heard myself make before, but the camera captured the moment. If that idiot had any brains, he would have been terrified by the sound. It was angry, menacing. There's no other way to describe it. I glanced at June, and she looked terrified. I didn't know if she came while I was photographing Pete, but I could see she was no longer aroused. There was only one last thing to do with Pete. I rummaged through his clothes and found his phone. The idiot hadn't even set a password. I opened the phone and found a contact labeled ICE and called the number listed as Stacy. The answer came almost instantly. Hello, is this Pete's wife? I asked. She responded affirmatively. Sorry, let me introduce myself. My name is Mike Flanagan, and I would like to know your name. Stacy, why are you calling me from Pete's phone? Did something happen? Well, Stacy, yes, something happened. No, Pete isn't hurt, but I caught him in bed with my wife this afternoon. He was having intimate relations with her when I interrupted. Now, he needs someone to pick him up because he's unable to drive. I don't even know where his car is, because apparently, he came with my wife from work to avoid attracting attention from the neighbors. Let me talk to him, please, she said. I raised the phone to Pete's face. Honey, you have to believe me. Nothing happened. It's all a mistake. Please don't come here. I'll figure out how to get back to my car and come home. Please, honey, don't come here. I beg you. He kept repeating when I took the phone back. Listen, Stacy, I'll text you my address. I just want to warn you that I'm afraid of what Pete might do if he's untied, so he'll remain tied up until you get here. Please take this pathetic excuse for a man and take him home so I can deal with my unfaithful wife, I said. I hung up and texted her the address, so she could input it into her phone and get directions if she didn't already know where we lived. I got dressed and checked the ropes on my prisoner. I didn't see any signs of strangulation, no swelling or redness that would indicate poor circulation. So, I was quite pleased with my first experience in bondage. June begged me to let her go before Stacy arrived. Apparently, she feared Stacy would attack her when she was especially vulnerable. June, you may not deserve my protection, but I won't let her hurt you too much while you're tied up. I'll untie Pete when she gets here. I hope they want to leave quickly. Then I'll let you go too. You can both call the police after this, but I don't think it's in my best interest for both of you to be free at the same time. I might have to use deadly force to defend myself, I said coldly. Only a few minutes passed before the doorbell rang. I used the time between the phone call and Stacy's arrival to hide my video camera and the other camera in a place where no one would find them. I took the film and memory card, put them in a safe, and hid the key. As soon as I returned to the bedroom, the bell rang again. I turned and walked to the front door to let Mrs. Pete in. To be honest, I still didn't know his last name. I beat him, tied him up, gagged him, and abused him, but I still didn't know his full name. The thought made me smile. When I brought her into the bedroom, she stopped in the doorway and stared at the scene. I paused, observing her reaction. She was looking at her husband, the man to whom she had sworn allegiance, tied up on the bed with his butt in the air. I stood next to June, positioning myself to protect her. I would let Stacy hit June once, maybe twice, but I would stop any further physical violence while she was tied up. Stacy surprised me. She looked around the bedroom, then slowly walked over. You know, Mr. Flanagan, she began, I had to believe you, especially after you gave Pete the chance to talk on the phone. You wouldn't have let him call me and talk to me if what you said wasn't true. I just couldn't imagine all this while driving here. Did you know or approve of the fact that Pete was cheating? I've long suspected he's been sleeping with anyone who will take off her panties in front of him, but I never had any proof, she said. She pulled out her phone and took a few pictures. Then she walked over to her husband, noting the shaved area and the word burned into his back. She laughed out loud at the sight. I think you won't want to go to the gym for a while, she commented. Are these all surprises, or is there something else? I had to confess. Pete and June had conspired to make me their intimate slave and bought all the equipment in that box. Stacy began to examine each item and, from time to time, looked up at me in confusion when she found something whose purpose she couldn't identify. I just shrugged at some of the items I had exposed. I then calmed down Pete by putting a gag in his mouth to silence him. I described how he had been used as an object, how he fantasized about using me. Finally, Stacy turned her attention to June. I thought June might pass out, or maybe lose control of her bladder, or both. She already had a small bladder, but now, she had been used and kept tied up for an extended period. Stacy walked over and punched June in the chest as hard as she could. The sound was loud, followed by the scream that escaped June. Her breasts, although small, were extremely sensitive. She never allowed rough play with them, and a large red mark immediately appeared on one of her breasts. Stacy leaned toward June's tear-streaked face and spat in her eye. You don't care that Pete and I have 3 kids. You just had an itch between your legs and decided to drag Pete into bed. Now I'll leave with my husband, but I hope he makes your life hell. She spat in her other eye. June couldn't rub her eyes to clear them. I freed Pete's hands and then stepped back, taking the gun out of the drawer, making sure he saw me chamber around. Pete, untie your legs. Then you and your wife need to leave. Any movement in my direction, and you'll receive 2 bullets in your chest. When you get home, you can call the police. I'm not going to run, and I'll surrender without resistance. Do you understand me? He nodded. I assumed it would be difficult for him to move after being tied for so long, but he soon freed his legs and reached for the object in his ass. Stacy stopped him. No, dear, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Don't take it out until we're home. I'm a little horny, and I think we should explore your new interest in being tied up. I might like it too. Pete blushed, nearly turning blue, but he didn't say a word. He carefully dressed and tried to straighten up. I had never experienced what it was like to have something in my backside, but from the looks of it, it was causing him a lot of pain when he tried to walk. Nevertheless, he managed to move along the corridor and left my house with his wife. I hoped it would be forever. Now, I turned to my wife. I loosened the ropes on her arms so she could free herself. Then I stepped back, taking out the gun again. Same deal. Don't try anything. or I'll put 2 bullets in your heart. If you think otherwise, try attacking me. I'll say I feared for my life because of what I did to you. I'll call Stacy and Pete as witnesses to confirm how much pressure you were under." June nodded, signaling that she understood. She slowly freed her hands and began to untie her legs. She had difficulty standing. I retreated to a safe distance and watched her closely as she freed herself. She slowly stood up and headed for the bathroom. After using the toilet, she dried herself and stood up again, her movements labored. She returned to the bedroom. She looked terrible. Tears and dried saliva covered her face, her mascara smudged. There was a huge red mark on her chest from Stacy's blow. She continued to walk with difficulty. When I asked if her butt hurt, she simply nodded. By the time she left the bathroom, I had unloaded the gun and hidden it, along with the magazine, in different places. I planned to get rid of the weapon once she fell asleep. I was sure she wouldn't leave my humiliation unanswered. I could hardly imagine her doing anything differently. We had played a kind of game of who would outwit who more than once during our marriage, but the stakes were now higher than they had ever been. "Are you going to clean yourself up?" I asked. I knew it was an insensitive question, but on some level, I still loved her, and it just slipped out. She shook her head. "No, I don't deserve to be clean after what I did to you. I just want to sleep and hope that this was all a nightmare I will wake up from. I once thought that a little affair with Pete would be something romantic, but now I understand that it was a hateful and stupid decision. I love that she took the ropes and the robe belt from the bed and threw them in the trash. I'll clean up here tomorrow," she said, "since I guess I'll be taking a sick leave, and it won't take long. I'm really sick of what I did to you," she added. She threw off the blanket and was about to climb into bed when I stopped her. I remember handing her the phone. "Dial 911 before you go to bed. You need to report what I did," I said. She looked at me as though I were crazy. I continued, "I won't report it myself, but I'm willing to go to jail. Your only crime is breaking the verbal contract you made with me, God, and all of our friends and family. Heck, even courts don't recognize marriage vows as a contract. You haven't committed a crime, but I am guilty of a number of serious offenses: assault, unlawful imprisonment, and perhaps even kidnapping. You and Pete can get your comeuppance by simply reporting my crimes. You'll have all our savings, bills, and this house while I rot in prison, living out your fantasy of having me there." She shook her head and climbed into bed, hugging her body pillow and starting to cry. I sat on her left, in the dressing chair, and just watched her cry until she fell asleep. Then I returned to the living room, sat in my favorite chair, and waited for the police to arrive. When Pete called, it was strange. It was only around noon, the time when our children, if we had any, would be returning home from school. I could imagine the talking, shouting, and maybe even screaming as the kids burst into the kitchen, looking for a snack, all at once trying to tell us about their day at the loudest volume possible. Amidst these thoughts, despair overtook me, realizing that these children would never appear to June and me. Even if I could somehow forgive her and beg for her forgiveness, I doubted she would ever be mine again. I don't drink much, just a couple of bottles of beer a day. I rarely drink strong alcohol at home, but now I was so sad that I couldn't even bring myself to go and grab a beer from the fridge. Somewhere between these thoughts, the events of the day, stress, anger, and everything else, had drained the last of my energy, and I fell asleep in the chair. When I woke up, I immediately remembered where I was and why, and I felt a rush of fear. I had left myself in a vulnerable position. Even without a weapon, June could have done serious damage to me. She had a rolling pin, and I'm sure she knew how to use it. There were also knives and cast iron pans in the kitchen that could cause significant damage. When I woke up, it felt as though I had spent the day doing the hardest work of my life. My back, legs, arms, neck, and stomach hurt. I was hungry and slowly made my way to the kitchen to make myself a sandwich and drink a glass of water. Afterward, I went to the guest bathroom to relieve myself and then barricaded myself once more in one of the 2 guest bedrooms, where I slept for a couple more hours. By 6 o'clock in the morning, I got up quietly, went into the master bedroom, grabbed clothes, soap, shampoo, and shaving supplies. Yes, even a toothbrush and toothpaste, and rushed to the guest bathroom to get ready for the new day. I was surprised that the police had not yet shown up, but there was still plenty of time for June and Pete to file a report. Perhaps they were just waiting to arrest me at one of the construction sites I was supposed to be working at that day. I didn't have much of an appetite, but I knew that a good breakfast was essential to start the day. So, I stopped at the nearest diner, ordered a grand slam, and quickly ate it, barely pausing to taste the food. Then I went to the first site, where we were pouring the driveway and front sidewalk. It looked like it would be a hot day, and the concrete would set quickly, so there was plenty of work to do. After lunch, I drove to another site where they needed to move stones into every room so the drywallers could finish in one day. Then, I went to the third site to run wires for a smart home the clients wanted to install. Luckily, the drywall hadn't been installed yet, so all changes could easily be made. Finally, by 5 o'clock in the evening, the other workers finished their shift and went home. I was still expecting a visit from the local police, so I wasn't in a hurry to leave. I finished gathering my tools, cords, and other odds and ends, then locked them in a work locker on the back bed of my pickup. Since I had no plans to return to this site anytime soon, I didn't want any of my colleagues to covet my tools. I was about 10 blocks from home when I decided to stop for a beer and some bar food. You know, greasy burgers, greasy fries, and a couple of cold beers. These foods are harmful to your blood vessels, but they provide a sense of comfort, especially when anticipating a possible stint in prison. I decided to allow myself a little pleasure. As I finished my beer, I wished everyone in the bar a good year. I think it surprised them a little, given that it was summer. Then, I headed home, though now it was difficult to call this place home. When I arrived, I expected to see my things either on the grass in front of the house or in the trash, but nothing like that happened. I carefully locked the pickup, making sure there was nothing of value inside in the cab, as I figured the cops would catch me soon. Who knows when I would be able to pick up my things? It would probably take years. I was sure June would never agree to my bail. But another surprise awaited me when I opened the door. I was absolutely certain the locks had already been changed. It was about 8 o'clock in the evening, a time when I usually came home around 6 o'clock, but lately, I had been coming back much later. At that moment, I felt like I was in an episode of The Twilight Zone. Nothing seemed broken in the house, as far as I could tell. Our wedding photo was still hanging on the wall. This wasn't just an ordinary photo, this was a 35 by 50 centimeters poster, not the usual 20 by 25 centimeters frame. I was sure it would either be gone or cut up. From the kitchen came June's quiet singing to the beat of the radio. She didn't look angry or worried. When she noticed me standing in the kitchen doorway with a puzzled expression on my face, she simply said, "Hey honey, you're finally home." "I see. Did you have a hard day at work?" "You didn't call, so I didn't know when to cook dinner. I made a roast that can be served anytime. Why don't you clean yourself up before dinner?" I probably nodded, but honestly, I don't remember if I said anything. Where was all the righteous rage? I turned to go to the bedroom to get clean clothes and take a shower when she stopped me. "Would you like a beer?" I shuddered. Now, I was sure of one thing. She was going to poison me. Maybe it would just be HB so she could beat me up, or maybe she would get ketamine from somewhere to overdose and fake an accident. I slowly retreated from the kitchen. I don't remember if I was able to say anything, but I knew one thing. I couldn't afford to turn my back on her. She had the whole day to, together with Pete, develop a plan for my death as revenge for what I had done to them. I went into the guest bathroom to think about my next steps. The door had a lock, which provided me with temporary safety from physical attack. The only thing I feared was that she wouldn't buy ammunition for the gun. A door made of hollow material wouldn't withstand a shot from my 12-gauge. Yes, she knew how to load and fire that gun because, when we first moved into the house, there was a serial killer in our area. She hadn't wanted to learn to shoot a pistol, but had agreed to learn how to use a gun. As I tried to make sense of her behavior, a thought came to mind. What if yesterday had just been a nightmare, and in fact, it was Monday evening, not Tuesday? Maybe I had made it all up. The betrayal, the attack on June and Pete. Did Pete and Stacy even exist? Maybe this was just a figment of a sick imagination. That would explain why June was so calm and caring now, instead of being the angry vixen I had expected. To be honest, I thought she had already filed for divorce, citing moral humiliation, not to mention that she might have called the police. I checked my phone. No, it was Tuesday. I looked around the bathroom. My things were gone. Damn, she must have moved them back to the master bathroom. I had a headache, and the greasy burger and fries I had eaten earlier started to churn in my stomach. All my stress had usually been about finishing my construction work on time, not worrying that my wife might be planning to harm me. I don't like conflict like most people. I've already told you about my fighting skills. I don't think I'm weak. But yesterday forced me to do something drastic for my peace of mind and self-respect. I washed my hands and face, drying them with one of the guest towels. Maybe this would make June act normal. She hated it when I used guest towels. I took a few deep breaths to calm my nerves a little. It didn't help my stomach, but at least my heart rate slowed. Opening the door, I returned to the kitchen. When we had guests, we usually ate at a beautiful table I had made with my own hands, but we usually ate dinner sitting on stools at the kitchen island. I had built the island on 2 levels, one for cooking, the other for convenient eating. Today, the table was set with a tablecloth, ready for 2. There were candles, and in the center, a flower arrangement. The lights in the dining room were dimmed, creating a romantic atmosphere. Soft music played quietly from the living room. Like I said, it felt like an episode of The Twilight Zone. Something strange was happening, and I had no control over the situation. For the last 24 hours, I had been waiting for the police to show up. I expected screams, tears, and accusations. I even expected phrases like, "I love you," "It's not what you think," or "It didn't mean anything." But what I couldn't have foreseen was a romantic candlelit dinner. June even chose a wine I could tolerate, rather than the sour, pretentious swill she usually insisted on. June served the food. While I can't say she's a bad cook, sometimes we ended up with mediocre dishes, but this dinner smelled amazing. She did everything she could to make it perfect. I still wondered if she was trying to kill me somehow. Luckily, she brought a platter of meat, a bowl of mashed potatoes, bowls of gravy, green beans, corn, and cornbread. All I had to do to make sure the food wasn't poisoned was politely let her try each dish first. I can confidently say that the food tasted as good as it smelled. In the end, I was too full. I was stuffed to capacity, and besides, I had already eaten a burger and fries at the bar. I leaned back in my chair and looked at my cheating wife. "Thank you for this delicious dinner, June. You've outdone yourself." It was great. She became embarrassed and lowered her eyes. "It was the least I could do after what I did to you," she murmured so quietly that I could barely hear her. I couldn't ignore it. "Do you love and respect me?" I asked. "Is this what you call respect? Having intimate with some idiot in my house, in my bed? Is this how you show respect? By fantasizing about tying me up and humiliating me?" I knew she was trying to apologize, to seek forgiveness, but the last 24 hours, filled with stress, especially the constant expectation of arrest, had worn my nerves thin. And this feeling of complete detachment from reality in our house was starting to drive me mad. Everything felt upside down. I jumped up so suddenly that the chair fell back, and the deafening impact on the floor made June flinch in surprise. I walked around the fallen chair, without turning my back to her, and pressed my back against the wall. Her eyes widened when she realized I had literally pressed myself against the wall. My head turned from side to side, as though I was looking for danger. "Mike, what's wrong?" she asked, seeming genuinely concerned. "I don't understand anything," I replied. "Today, I was on edge all day, waiting for the police to arrive. I returned home, and you act like nothing happened." I almost convinced myself that everything that happened yesterday was just a dream, a sick invention of my mind. Out of all the scenarios I could have imagined, this dinner, none of this is like what I expected. She shook her head. "I'm not going to call the police on you. This is the truth as it is. It's not your fault what happened yesterday that caused you to get the better of us. I can only hope that yesterday was enough. I got off easy. You didn't hit me, humiliate me, or cause me physical pain." She showed me her wrists. "There aren't even any rope marks here," she continued. "Yes, I was scared when you got so angry and lost control, but you never laid a hand on me, and you didn't do it yesterday." She sighed. "It's a small sign to me that you still care about me, on some level. I've been thinking a lot today about what brought us to this point, and I'm not happy with myself in any way. I don't know what I expected from my husband, but somehow, I decided I deserved a little pleasure from someone else's attention, while you were trying your best to improve the lives of so many people." She fell silent, watching my reaction. I think my silence let her know it was okay to continue. "I know you don't like my colleagues," she said. "We're always standing around at parties, pretending that everything we say or do is so important to life. I didn't plan this, but at some point, I started acting like you weren't good enough or smart enough to understand our views. Hell, I even started to believe what my female coworkers said when they demeaned you, calling you almost a eunuch because you didn't give in to their seduction. I remember Pete and I standing at one of the parties, mocking how rude and out of place you were among us. The real people, you know, the real movers and shakers." And now I understand that we are just a bunch of dummies who will be the first to die in any disaster movie. She stopped and took a sip of wine. I was sitting here this morning, looking at this beautiful table and chairs you made for us. You build houses for people to live in. Hell, you built most of our house with your own hands. No one I work with can even assemble furniture from IKEA. We hire people to do it and then stand there, saying, "Oh, look at what we did," as if we were the ones who designed and built it. She sighed. Now I understand that we are just takers and deceivers. We take credit for other people's work and pretend we know what we're doing. Most of the women at my job treat their husbands poorly. They've slept with half the male team at work. I was almost the last one to stay away from it, but at some point, I started to believe their nonsense and decided I was missing out on some fun that I deserved. I deliberately chose Pete as my first outside lover. It wasn't hard to seduce him. He had already slept with most of the other women. To him, I should have been just another prey. She started crying. Looking back now, I realized that you probably heard us humiliating you right before you caught us. I can only imagine how painful it was to hear those words come out of my mouth. I won't try to justify myself by saying it was just chatter during intimate, because I really began to lose respect for you in my mind a long time ago. And only after you took control of the situation in our bedroom and took fair revenge on us did I realize what a good person you are. You are much better than us. She stood up and began clearing away the dishes. What do I have left now? She asked. My husband hates me. You're afraid of me. You can see it by the way you're standing pressed against the wall. I destroyed something good and pure. She pulled back the tablecloth, revealing the shiny surface of the table. It's like I've been chopping at this table with an axe, until I did so much damage that it could no longer be repaired. She turned away and carried the dirty dishes into the kitchen. Her shoulders were shaking, and I thought she would drop the plates. I think I wanted to say something encouraging, but at that moment, I wasn't able to console her or alleviate her pain and suffering. I just stood there, pressed against the wall, waiting. About 5 minutes passed before she calmed down a bit and returned to get the remaining dishes and cutlery. I saw how she was trying to hold back the sobs shaking her body when she turned. She had such a dejected expression on her face that it spoke volumes of the despair she felt. I used to think I could always read her, that she was open and transparent, but the way she hid her affair with Pete stunned me and made me believe she was a great actress. Can I trust her now? I thought. June finished clearing the table, and even the tablecloth went into the wash. I recognized it as the one her grandmother had made and given to us as a wedding gift. June had never let her decorate the table with it because she was so afraid it would get ruined. It was literally the last thing her grandmother did for us. I suppose, just by her using something so precious, I should have believed she was truly repentant. After she loaded the dishwasher and started it, June returned to the dining room. I was still trying to decide what to do next. She straightened her shoulders and looked me straight in the eyes. I suddenly felt afraid of what she was going to say. I think I need to move out immediately, she said. It's obvious you don't trust me and are afraid that I will physically harm you. I just realized, as I was putting the last dishes in the dishwasher, that you haven't eaten or drunk anything. Did you think I might poison you? She raised her hand. Don't answer that. Do you really think I want to hurt you? So, I can't stay here while you see me as a threat? She turned and headed toward the bedroom. Her shoulders were straightened, and her steps were slow. I guess she walked slowly so I would have time to stop her. But the question was, did I want to stop her? On one hand, she was the love of my life until yesterday. On the other hand, she had completely disrespected me and our marriage. I kept going over reasons to love and hate her in my head. Once again, it seemed like an eternity had passed while I was making this list, but I still hadn't come to any decision. I looked back when I realized I hadn't decided anything. I was still standing against the wall, waiting for danger. Had June gone? Was I in some kind of stupor? I looked back and could still hear her footsteps in the corridor. No, June hadn't left yet, but she would soon if I didn't do anything. I needed to decide. If she leaves, will she go to Pete? Or does she already have someone to replace him? I think it's a reasonable question, because it didn't take her long to replace me with Pete, who was already married. If she leaves, and I suddenly want her back, will it be too late? I can build a foundation, level a wall, make the roof airtight, but now I can't decide what to do. Finally, I forced myself to move away from the wall. With heavy steps, I walked down the corridor toward our bedroom. When was the last time I crossed this threshold? Was it just yesterday afternoon? It had been so long since I came home and found them making love. I stopped at the door. My figure was large enough that June wouldn't be able to easily leave the room unless I let her pass. I cleared my throat. I hadn't shed a single tear since this all started, but now my throat was tight with emotion, and I felt the tears starting to well up. Where are you going to live? That was all I could get out. She stopped sorting through the clothes she had laid out on the bed. I guess she was trying to decide what to take now and what to leave for later. She didn't look at me. I think I'll start with a couple of nights at a motel, she said. After this, I should probably find a one-room apartment somewhere closer to work. Maybe it will be close enough to walk and save on transportation. Is this a good idea? Don't you think I should ask? Who will be with you? I asked. She hesitated but didn't say anything. Do you really think I'll go and sleep with someone else? Do you think I'm that depraved? She asked. She shook her head. I suppose so. I had several lovers before I met you. I didn't have anyone when I started dating you. Well, until Pete. She shook her head again. I know you won't believe me, she said, but there will be no other men in my life until you divorce me. I've accepted that if I'm a threat to your mental well-being, our marriage is probably over. I apologize for every bad emotion, every broken dream, every doubt, and for ruining your love. I just hope you heal quickly and can move on. I'll let you know my new address so you can send me the documents. If you can't wait, I'll be ready to get them at work. I was still as confused as when this all started. Yesterday morning, I had a marriage with a woman whom I trusted with everything. Today, I was afraid of her. How could it be that I thought she would want to harm me? Is trust so fragile that one incident can destroy it completely? Finally, I found the words, I don't want you to leave. June looked at me in surprise and disbelief. What did you say, Mike? I cleared my throat and tried again. I don't want you to leave, at least for now. You don't have a plan. You have no place to go. You can stay here, and we can talk. Let's try to take the emotion out of this disaster and maybe find a solution, instead of both of us throwing ourselves into the breach. I feel like if you leave now, you won't come back. I don't know if you're in love with Pete. Hell, I don't even know if you've talked to him since yesterday. I guess I said it today. She nodded. Stacy answered his phone when I called. She giggled when she said it. He was busy and would call back later. I really don't know how he's doing after yesterday. She stopped packing her things. You know, I really don't want to leave. I'm afraid to go out alone, especially at night. And now it's dark, and I don't even know which motel to go to. June sat down on the edge of the bed. What can I say or do to make you believe that I don't mean you any harm? Hell, even when I decided to sleep with Pete, I didn't mean to hurt you. I just thought, she hesitated, with my body. And I was sure that you would never find out, so no harm would come of it. Any sane adult would tell me that I live in a world of illusion. She shook her head again and looked up at the ceiling as if she were talking to someone there. Damn it. I had fantasies about being with two men at once whenever I wanted. I often imagined that you and Pete. I never thought you would agree to this. I just let my dreams control me. She looked at me again, and we probably had the same expression of despair on our faces. Pete, while he was having intimate with me, was saying how hot it would be if you took part and became his. He described how you would look when you gave me pleasure and how he would have intimate with me at that time. Yesterday was exactly as he described. Only he was on the bottom, and you were the alpha male who took his virginity. She paused for a moment and chuckled slightly. Watching you make him yours was exciting. It was exactly as he described. Only he was on the bottom, and you were the one who took him. I shook my head but didn't say anything. Her face suddenly brightened, as if an idea had come to her. Listen, the lock in this bedroom works. Why don't you sleep here, and I'll go to one of the other bedrooms. You can lock the door, and I won't be able to get in and harm you. She stopped for a moment. I want you to believe that I have no intention of physically harming you. I've already done enough harm on an emotional level, and I'm ashamed of myself for it. I understand that you need to make sure that I am not a threat, so I suggest you take the master bedroom. I can't sleep here. I can't lie where you had intimate with him. I realized this shouldn't be any different from any motel room I had ever stayed in, but just standing here in this room made my skin tighten. She looked at me carefully and noticed how the hair stood up on my arms. She dropped her shoulders in defeat. I think I'll stay in the bedroom where I slept last night, she said. I will make a noise when the door opens that will wake me up. Tomorrow, I will buy keyed locks for all the bedrooms and replace the ones that are currently in place. Then I can lock the room when I need it. At that moment, June's phone rang. When she looked at the screen, she showed me that it was Pete. I nodded for her to answer. Hello. June turned on the speakerphone. Hello, how is your marriage doing this evening? Has your husband already thrown you out into the street? The voice was female. We both guessed it was Stacy. No, he hasn't thrown me out into the street yet. I offered to leave last night, but he kindly allowed me to stay for now. As for my marriage, I believe that I destroyed it and destroyed him as a person. He refuses to sleep in our bedroom. In fact, I think even standing here, he feels disgusted and uneasy. I don't know how he would have felt if he hadn't stopped us yesterday and saved his honor. She looked at me pleadingly as she made her final statement. Mrs. Prescott, did you kick Pete out of the house? No, I haven't done that yet. I have children to think about. I left Pete at home today so he could realize what he did to me and the kids. I think he is beginning to understand the lesson your husband taught him. I continue my work. Please give me your husband's number so I can send him a video of Pete. Maybe this will make him smile. June gave the number and turned off the phone. A few seconds later, a new message alert appeared on my phone. I opened the message and started the video. Pete probably doesn't want anyone to see him like this. The video was short, but showed my wife's lover wearing a French-made uniform and heels. Where Stacy got heels that fit Pete, I'll never know. His legs were completely shaved. Turning around, I saw that his back was also devoid of hair. The inscription adulterer was clearly visible through the transparent blouse. I showed the video to June, and she hung her head in shame. Tears began to flow down her cheeks as she tried to ask a question. After several unsuccessful attempts, she finally spoke. Are you going to do something like that to me? Or are you just going to divorce me and leave me with nothing? I didn't answer right away. I wrote to Stacy, saying I was deleting the video so no one else could see it. I also promised that I would not post it online. The temptation was strong, but I didn't see how this would help Stacy and her children. When I decided to answer June, I asked a question. If I wanted to punish you in the same way that Stacy punishes Pete, would you agree to that? I don't enjoy causing pain, especially to someone I have feelings for, I added. Her answer surprised me. Mike, I want your forgiveness so badly that I would do almost anything to have a chance to restore what we had before I decided to sleep with Pete. If you need me to get a tattoo on my forehead that will inform everyone about my actions, I will gladly do it. If you want to beat me, I will kneel with my hands behind my head. If you want me roughly, I will hold my hands behind my head while you make me choke and maybe even throw up. I fully expect that you will want a divorce, and I will not resist if that happens. She stopped, trying to figure out which of the proposed options might seem like a fair punishment to me, but not noticing a single sign. She continued to list possible punishments. She even offered to sleep with some homeless man if it would help. I was beginning to realize that she was desperately looking for a way to be forgiven when she suggested going to her father, a very religious pastor, to confess to him so that he could punish her. I knew she was serious. Her father still believed in spanking and severely punished those he considered sinners, especially his daughter. This man was not only cruel in his methods, but also convinced that any deviation from his religious principles required physical punishment. I knew that if she went to him, she would not escape cruel consequences. Finally, I raised my hand to stop her. I almost regretted not recording this conversation, because it seemed to me that she wasn't fully aware of what she was suggesting. If I agreed to even a small part of her proposals, she would be completely humiliated, and her self-esteem would be destroyed. I realized that for a while, I might feel satisfaction, even a sense of retribution, but this would be a temporary feeling. Its long-term consequences, constant regret and pain, would be too destructive. Let's postpone this discussion for at least a couple of days, I suggested. Let's each write a list of punishments that, in our opinion, you could suffer. Then we'll compare these lists and decide what can be included in the plan and what should be excluded. This will help us avoid situations where I demand punishment for years and forgiveness never comes. I also explained to her my concerns about some of her suggestions and why I didn't think they would lead to anything good. June nodded in agreement. She stood up and left the bedroom, returning soon with a couple of notepads and pens. She gave me one and sat on the bed, starting to write on hers. I decided that this would be a good time to leave the room, which still disgusted me, and return to the dining room. I sat down at the table and began writing my list. I let my imagination run wild to release some of the demons that were raging in my head. I was going to edit this list later, once my thoughts had cooled. After about an hour or so, I looked up and decided it was time for a beer. I felt very thirsty, and my head began to hurt. The good news was that some of my anger toward June was starting to subside. Now, I felt rather disappointed and sad. I still didn't know if we could survive this as a couple, but I was no longer so focused on destruction and cruel revenge. It was late, and the police still hadn't come. June may have been telling the truth when she said she wasn't going to go to the police, but Pete would definitely want justice. I was sure it was only a matter of time. I needed sleep, so I put my list away, then shaved, showered in the guest bathroom, and went to bed. She woke me up more than once by giving me pleasure and then climbing on top of me until I was completely awake. With my boxers on, it would be harder for her to wake me up this way. Of course, I should have worn pajamas, but I didn't have any. I had warm pants that I sometimes wore in the winter, but now, in the summer, they would be too hot, and besides, they were still lying in the chest of drawers in the master bedroom, and I had no intention of going there again that night. I placed a small object in front of the door so that it would rattle if it was opened. After that, I fell fast asleep. I just drank my quiet cup of coffee, filled my thermos, grabbed my lunchbox, and left. June would then get up, shower, and prepare for her day at work. There was usually enough coffee left over for her to drink her cup before heading out to work and collecting debts for various businesses. She typically ate lunch with her colleagues, as their lunch breaks were staggered, meaning they didn't need to bring food to work. June had enough money to afford such lunches. I was always surprised that she didn't buy coffee on the way to work from some fancy cafe, preferring to drink the regular work coffee at home. I loved when she did persuade me to go with her to a local cafe, where the barista often looked down on me. It irritated me. I usually just ordered strong black coffee without sugar. June was always trying to convince me to try something new, something more sophisticated. This was another example of how she tried to introduce me to her circle. Her colleagues seemed too arrogant and unreal to me. I didn't like this pretense, and I didn't want to be part of this world. So, today, she appeared in the kitchen earlier than usual, and I raised my eyebrow as Mr. Spock did in Star Trek and looked at her. June caught my gaze and even blushed slightly. I continued to look at her, waiting for her to say something. She turned around abruptly and walked back to the bedroom. I should have apologized for ruining her morning plans, but was it my fault? I finished my coffee, washed my cup, and drove to the nearest McDonald's for an egg and cheese sandwich before heading to the construction site. The day passed as usual. I still expected a visit from the police, but they didn't come. I returned home around 9:30, already physically, but not emotionally, tired. June cooked a delicious dinner for us again. We ate and talked a little. She spoke about her day and then stunned me with unexpected news. "I think I need to leave the company," she said. "I've been thinking about this a lot the last few days. It has to do with my affair with Pete, but even more so with what's going on at work. I tried to act normal today, but all I could think about was the shallowness of the people around me. They treat spouses as some kind of interchangeable thing. There is no love or honor there." I was ready to scream in frustration. All the women could talk about was how I found Pete as a lover, and then a couple of them even suggested who I should start an affair with next. I was so disgusted by this that I finally couldn't stand it and kicked everyone out of my office. She took my hands and looked into my eyes. "Do you agree that I need to leave? This is a toxic environment. How can we move forward when I am constantly surrounded by such negativity? At work, I feel like I should find a position with some small accounting firm that employs real people and not artificial characters like my company." Judging by the expression on my face, she realized that I agreed with her. She hugged my waist while sitting on a chair, and her face was right in my groin. I immediately felt how I began to react to her proximity, even if I was angry. Her voice was muffled as she spoke, speaking directly to my body through my clothes, but I still understood her words. "I don't want intimate right now, but you definitely look like you could use some relaxation. What do you say, hero? Want some fun?" It took me a lot of effort, but I pulled her head away and forced her to look into my eyes. "Are you serious? Do you really want to do this for me? Or do you just want to use me as a replacement for Pete?" "No," she shook her head. "I want you. I haven't even thought about Pete since Monday, except when I tried to feel sick about what we did to you." I stopped her. "Someday, perhaps, I will ask you to do this, but not now. My anger has not yet subsided, and I could physically harm you. From the moment I found you, I haven't had a single thought." I sat down at the table, and she returned to her seat opposite me. One of the owners of the company called me and asked to set up a meeting to discuss my future. I'll meet him tomorrow. This is another reason why I'm thinking about leaving. Maybe I'll get fired. She paused. Pete also returned to work today. He moves very carefully. I don't know if Stacy sent him to work with something up his fifth place. but he wore a jacket all day, which is uncharacteristic of him. His shirt was very thin, so he probably hid his adulterer sign. He came into my office and said that he was not going to call the police and file a report against you. He said Stacy made it clear to him that if he went to the police, she would kick him out of the house. This certainly brought some relief, although I understood that Pete and June could change their minds at any time until the statute of limitations for filing a claim expired. I had no idea how much time they had for this. It's really a relief, I replied. June nodded and smiled at me. I imagine it made you feel better to know that none of us are going to come after you. I'm sure Pete is still angry, but he knows he'll be penniless and without a family if Stacy leaves him. He really loves his kids and doesn't want to be their weekend dad. So, I should pray that he and Stacy stay together, and that you and I stay together too. What kind of life awaits me? She squeezed my hand tighter. I promise I won't let you feel doomed to stay with me. As I already said, I am ready to do anything to earn your forgiveness. She paused briefly, thinking about something before speaking again. How about we order dinner and then go through our punishment list for me? I don't think I need another day of thinking. Some of my suggestions are frankly crazy. I decided to agree, since my nightly fantasies were just as absurd. For example, one of my suggestions was for her to rob a bank and run away with millions to some third-world country. We sat down at the table with a beer for me and a bottle of wine for June. She didn't even try to persuade me to drink wine, which was unusual. Once we got comfortable, we shared our lists. I won't list all the stupid things we wrote, but we discussed and edited our proposals, trying to find those that could be realistic and not destructive to our relationship. One idea was a post-nuptial agreement that would define how our future disagreements would be handled. We agreed that if it came to divorce due to infidelity, the offended party should receive 75% of all property, and the culprit should pay all legal fees. We also decided that we would use arbitration instead of going to court to reduce costs. June tried to reassure me. I would never do this to you. She shook her head, confirming her words. Is it true? A couple of weeks ago, you would have told me that you would never cheat on me. Look where we ended up. She fell silent and didn't find anything to say in response. After we had drafted the agreement so that the lawyer could review it and put it into legal form, we discussed the other items on our punishment lists. I took the initiative by proposing the following idea. I was considering ignoring you, or as the British say, sending you to Century, I said, looking at her puzzled expression. How is that? She asked, not understanding what I was saying. Simply put, I continued, in the Amish tradition, a person who has committed an offense is subjected to a bypass. They still live in the house, do their job, but no one talks to them. They are completely isolated from communication while the punishment continues. In England, there was once a prison city called Century where prisoners were not allowed to speak. Over time, this came to mean a complete boycott. I sighed. There are times when I'm so angry at you that I think about just ignoring you until you leave or until I forgive you. June bit her lip nervously, thinking about my words, and after a few minutes, she asked, "How will it work here? Do you seriously think you can do this? Could you stop talking to me?" "The way I see it," I said, "we will split our expenses equally. You will be responsible for your expenses, and I will be responsible for mine. You will still go to work, but you will not interact with anyone outside of work except your family. Since I was not the one who broke our relationship, I will be able to communicate whenever I want, outside of work. I will continue to attend your and my family's gatherings, but you will not attend my family's events. This is not the way to allow me to behave loudly. I will still be bound by our vows." I paused to see how she would take it. She nodded, and I continued. We could still have dinner together, but without talking. We would sleep in separate rooms. If we agreed, you could still do my laundry, but I'm willing to do mine myself. We could agree on a system where we can each use the washer and dryer. I'll probably buy another TV and DVD player. We could each watch whatever we wanted without disturbing the other, or we could each grab a tablet and subscribe to an online service like Netflix or Hulu. Essentially, it would come down to us sharing a house, but nothing more. There would be no conversations, no gifts for birthdays or Christmas, no celebrations of anniversaries, nothing of the kind. It would be a punishment, but both of us would suffer in the end. "Can you really do this to me?" June asked, realizing what being ignored meant. "All I need is to remember PETA having intimate with you again while you humiliated me, and I can do it in an instant." I felt my shoulders and jaw tense as I said the last part. Later, June would say that she felt a little scared again because my face had frozen, as if it had been carved out of granite. Her shoulders sagged further, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I think I'll try to accept this punishment if that's what you demand. I would hate it, but I will try to do it if it helps you forgive me. Then she looked me straight in the eyes. I would rather you beat the sanity out of me, or attack me, or do anything other than never speak to me again. Not being able to sit down and discuss our daily routines or future plans would be hell on earth. I was in a dark place in my thoughts. I couldn't stop and knew it wasn't helping. Damn, I wish you had thought of that before you slept with Pete. I got up. I'd had enough. My head was pounding and my jaw ached from the constant tension. I threw her one last thought, turned around, and headed to my shrine. It's a pity that I don't hit women. You already knew I wouldn't hit you, and beating isn't my fantasy, so it was a safe request. As punishment, I took a couple of pain pills and went into the bedroom with them and the beer, closing the door behind me. I looked at the door. Tomorrow, I'd have to remember to buy more locks so I could secure my space. I don't know when June went to bed. I turned off the overhead light to make the room darker, so my eyes could rest. Then I plugged in my headphones and turned on soothing music on my phone. I don't know when I finally fell asleep. Thursday morning, when I woke up, my whole body was stiff and painful. Obviously, I wasn't very relaxed while I slept. I snuck into June's bedroom to get some of my things. I tried not to look at the bed, moving in the dark and quietly collecting socks, underwear, shirts, and jeans. When I finally took a closer look at the bed, I saw that it was empty, and there was no sign that June had even laid down. I stopped and took a deep breath, then thought that maybe she had left me. If so, tomorrow, I would contact a lawyer and begin the divorce process. I returned to my room, put my things away, and took a shower. I didn't shave. There was only one reason why I shaved, and now there was no point in pleasing her anymore. When I got dressed and went to make coffee, I found June at the table with her head down. She must have fallen asleep after crying. The documents we had been looking at were under her face, with stains from tears. You'll have to redo them before you take them to a lawyer, I said, as I made coffee and moved around the kitchen. June began to stir. Apparently, the smell of fresh coffee and the sounds of movement helped her wake up. She looked terrible. There were imprints on her face from the paper she had slept on. I'm sure her neck and back were stiff and sore. I poured her a cup of coffee and placed it in front of her. Drink a little to wake up, then take a shower and sleep in bed for an hour, I told her. She nodded and took a sip of the hot drink. After a few sips, she was able to speak. I know you'll have a lot to do today, as always, so I'll take our agreement to the company lawyer. I hope he'll quickly prepare the documents so that we can sign them. I agreed with her and went to work. It was another beautiful summer day, and we moved forward on SES. I finished around 8 in the evening and went home. June made me a burger and chips. Apparently, she had already had dinner by the time I arrived. She sat with me at the table, although I was not in the mood for her company. I had a few random thoughts about intimate running through my head, but every time she said something, all I heard was, "You are so much bigger and better than my worthless husband." She tried to get me to talk, but for some reason, I just couldn't say a word. I remember methodically biting and chewing my food while she continued to try to engage me in conversation. When I was done, I quickly cleared the table, washed the dishes and pan, then grabbed another pain pill and a fresh beer and went to the bedroom. Then I realized that I had forgotten about the locks again. My things had disappeared again. My head started to hurt badly, and I felt pressure behind my eyes. She had absolutely no respect for my space or my wishes. Seeking to get back into my good graces, I thundered into the living room, where she was watching some romantic movie on the Hallmark Channel. I wanted to scream at her, but I knew my head would explode if I even spoke in a normal tone. My statement came out as a hoarse whisper, but it was perhaps even more effective than shouting. Leave my things alone. I know what you're trying to do and why, but that doesn't help me. Except for your antics, leave me alone. Don't cook for me. Don't try to talk to me until I want to talk to you. I have a headache, and it started hurting as soon as I entered this house. She just looked at me in bewilderment. I couldn't shake my head. The pain was too strong. Finally, I just turned around, went back to the bedroom, slammed the door, and took off my shoes. It took some time before I finally fell asleep. Friday morning, the headache subsided, but a slight pain still remained. I got up, did my morning routine, put the coffee on, and continued getting dressed. June tried to catch me without anything again, but this time, She was disappointed because I was already wearing jeans. I don't know if my bare skin made her want physical contact, or just the fact that I had been avoiding her for the past few days, but she tried to hug me before I put on my shirt, socks, and shoes. It was another normal day at the construction site, but I remembered to stop by the hardware store and buy some digital locks. When I returned home, June was nowhere to be seen, even though her car was in the garage. As I remembered now, I started to get a little worried about her mental state. When I didn't find her in the kitchen or living room, after I made it so clear to her that I didn't want her touching my things and putting them back in the bedroom, I wanted to find her right away to make sure she was okay. I found her in the bedroom. What I saw was shocking. She was lying on the bed completely without anything, with a large pillow placed under her stomach. She, or someone else, had tied her thighs to her calves the same way I had tied Pete on that memorable day. She must have gotten the ropes and straps out of the trash, since that's what she was using as her restraints. One of my ties was tied around her wrists and threaded through the headboard. However, it seemed like she could easily free her hands if she wanted to. There was a gag next to her head. Heck, she even took out a video camera and placed it in almost the same spot where I had placed it on that memorable Monday. She looked at me expectantly. When I didn't fully enter the room or say anything, she finally took the lead. "Mike, honey, I want you to do to me the same way you did to Pete. I want you to use my favorite leather strap on my fifth place. Then I want you to say the same words to me that you said to Pete. Please do this so I can begin to earn your forgiveness." Nothing else I said or did showed you how much I hated myself for what I did to you and our marriage. To say I was shocked and surprised is the second biggest understatement of my life. The first would be if someone said I was only slightly upset when I caught Pete in bed with June. I remember forcing myself into the room. The feeling of déjà vu was so strong that I could barely control myself. The room as a whole looked much the same as it did that Monday when Pete and June had intimate here just 4 days ago. Her body on the bed was almost in the same position as Pete's body. One could say that this image was indelibly etched into June's memory, since she had no access to either video or photographs to refresh her memories. I forced myself to move around the room, looking around. I still hadn't said anything. June began to cry, and I think the cause of her grief was my silence. "Please, dear, punish me. I've never let anyone do this to me before." I shook my head in disbelief. I was still looking around. I saw a pile of clothes almost where Pete had thrown his jeans that fateful Monday. I walked over and looked. June had placed her jeans in almost the same spot, and her favorite white leather belt was threaded through the loops. This was remarkable because she rarely wore a belt. Her figure was almost perfect, and her jeans fit so tightly that the belt was more of an accessory. She usually wore it over a long blouse or dress to highlight her waist. I bent down and pulled the belt out of its loops. It was used so rarely that the skin was still tough. June was still talking. She couldn't see me because of her position on the bed. I think she was nervous because I hadn't said a word since I walked into the room. I folded the belt in half and then pulled it sharply, creating a loud pop. June flinched at the sound. "Oh, honey, do you have my belt? Are you going to use it on me?" I wanted to be like it was with Pete. "Please, honey, do it the same way. Punish me." My head started to hurt again. I didn't want to hurt her, but she was driving me crazy. I just wanted a faithful and loving wife. I really didn't want to hit her. I didn't want to make her feel pain, and I didn't want to humiliate her, but she was the one who hurt me. She was responsible for all this crap that had now become our lives. I remember walking up to the bed where she could see me, holding the leather belt in my hands. I clicked it again. I guess I just didn't know what else to do with it. My anger at what she had done began to subside, replaced by a deep sadness. Later, I would call this the beginning of depression. I remember her saying, "Please, Mike, put a gag in my mouth so I can feel what we were about to do to you. Punish me." I told her, "No, I don't want to do this." She insisted that I take my comeuppance. Finally, just to keep her quiet for a little while, I inserted a gag into her mouth. She was surprised at how uncomfortable the gag was, but I didn't even bother to fasten the strap behind her head. Finally, I realized she was begging me to take off my clothes. I did it reluctantly. When I remained without anything, I followed my original plan. She did not get any pleasure from this action. I don't remember much, but the video shows me touching her breasts, then running my hand over her butt, and then back to her breasts. June would later say that she appreciated these small touches and caresses, but at that moment, she could only scream a little. I couldn't tell if her screams were from pleasure or from the discomfort the gag was causing. By then, I had already thrown off the belt. As much as she probably deserved a good spanking, I just couldn't do it. Part of my reluctance had to do with the deep-seated beliefs instilled in me by my parents and grandparents, which prohibited any physical violence against women. Another part of it was the social norms, and finally, I still loved this woman despite what she had done. Last but not least, I was afraid that because I was so angry and still in love with her, I might lose control and cause her irreparable harm. You might be asking, then, why did you do what you did to Pete? The answer is simple. I was in complete control of my emotions when I punished that idiot. He deserved everything I did to him or could have done, but I had nothing personal with him. He stole from me, but he did not betray me personally. Since June, and I did not have any relationship before his betrayal. No, June was a traitor. We met, dated, got to know each other, trusted each other with thoughts, dreams, and fears that no one else even knew about. We stood before our families, friends, and before God, made vows to be faithful to each other, and only the one you trust the most can inflict such a wound on you. My anger was deeper than just anger. I remember feeling torn apart. It's been a while since I've actually wanted intimate. I didn't see Pete's humiliation as something for my own pleasure. It was something I had to do, and he deserved it. I didn't enjoy it. Well, maybe some satisfaction from humiliating this scoundrel. I wanted to make love to June, not humiliate her. I wanted to hug her again and cuddle together, but I didn't trust her anymore. I didn't feel the same deep connection that I did just a few weeks ago. Her without anything body, in such a vulnerable position. Honestly, it's probably not what she wanted either. She clearly jumped at every opportunity to find a way to help me forgive her. I remember stroking her cheek. It's hard to hear my comment in the video, but I remember saying, "Please, let me take off this ring. I want you to talk to me." She resigned herself and allowed me to remove the ring. She swallowed deeply several times and rubbed her face against the sheet. She cried when she heard my words. Finally, she replied, "I know. I know. I hated the thought of me being so uncontrollable or letting you have so much power over me. It was such a dirty act, perhaps the most disrespectful act I could allow you to do. I was afraid that you would like it too much, or worse, that I might like it and want you to humiliate me in this way. I was afraid to give you such power over me." She fell silent, swallowing her tears. Still crying, she spoke again. "Pete never asked. He just put me in a position like that, and then started using me." She paused for a moment. "Yes, as you probably guessed, I liked it. I liked that I lost control. I liked that I could let go and let him take me like that." June looked me straight in the eye. I was ashamed that I could change my mind so much, from hating this kind of intimate to loving it. Her sobs intensified, if that was even possible. Now that I know what unusual intimate is like, I can't find a way to tell you, my only and beloved, why I had changed. The last few times with Pete were just to get. I think that's why I could say such terrible things about you and your ability to love me. The video shows me kneeling down and bowing my head. I remember feeling so empty and disappointed at the time that I could easily think about suicide. Yes, the thought that my suicide would be the final punishment for June flashed through my mind. Before this, I had not shed a single tear. My anger was so intense that I didn't feel the need to cry. But now that the anger was gone, all that remained was sadness and loneliness. When you make your girlfriend your best friend and marry her, there is no one left to turn to for the kind of support that a best friend gives. No, when all is well or you are facing a common enemy, you feel invincible because your best friend will always have your back and want the best for you. But when your best friend and lover betrays you, there is no one left to help. I was left alone, as if she had died. No, it was worse than if she had died. Then, at least, I would know that she remained faithful and loving. But she destroyed something much more valuable than the memory of a loved one. She made me question everything we once were. When I finally pulled myself together and raised my head, I saw that she had begun to untie herself to stand up. I don't know if she intended to console me, but I think that was her intention. It didn't matter. I slowly rose to my feet with a couple of painful groans. Although I was still relatively young, at that moment, I felt like I was 80 years old. She stopped trying to untie herself and looked at me again with hope. I grabbed my clothes and headed to the closet, grabbing a few more things. The only comment I made was, "I can't think of a better punishment than to deprive you of what you want. I'm not going to ask you to have weird intimate with you anymore. For this, you can call Pete and let him have you as much as your cheating heart desires." I hope you can convince Stacy. I went to the guest bedroom. I guess I could call it my bedroom now. I hung my clothes in the small closet and went to the garage to get tools to change the lock on the door. When I returned, June had already freed herself and was standing in the corridor. The tears had dried, but she was still sobbing quietly. After the emotional evening, she reached out to touch me as I sidled past her, but I just crouched down and began to remove the old lock. When I looked up, she was no longer there. I think she headed to the living room rather than her bedroom because she would have had to walk past me again to get there. I shrugged and continued replacing the lock, programming it with a code I didn't think she would be able to guess. This was the date a week before I discovered her with Pete. This day now mattered only to me as the last moment when I could consider our marriage happy. After that day, my doubts about her fidelity began, and since then, my relationship with June no longer brought me joy. After finishing with the lock, I returned to her bedroom and collected my personal belongings as well as more clothes. I also decided it was time to wash my dirty clothes. Luckily, I knew where the washing machine manual was, so I didn't have to talk to June to find out how to wash it properly. Yes, I know, real men don't read instructions and ask for directions, so what? Maybe ignoring it is the right way. June sat in the dark living room. I stopped there. I suggested that I use the washer and dryer on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. That leaves you with Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for your stuff. Any objections? June nodded, understanding where this was going. I went to the kitchen to make myself some dinner and then cleaned up after myself. I didn't know if she had eaten anything that evening or just came home to make this scene in the bedroom. After dinner, I took more clothes from her bedroom, this time focusing on the items in her dresser. I also moved my cameras and my guns to my room. After I moved everything, I stopped and thought about what else I might need to make this space truly mine. Looking around the room, I decided that if I rearranged the bed and tall chest of drawers, I could put a comfortable chair here and create a cozy reading corner. With a tablet and the internet, I could watch football or movies in privacy. Heck, if I put a small table next to the chair, I could even install a tablet holder. I waited until I heard June's footsteps in the hallway. She stopped at my door and stood there for several minutes. Finally, she walked further into her room and closed the door. I took apart the bed and rearranged the furniture to create my new space. When I was done, I went into the living room, took my recliner apart, moved the base into the bedroom, and put it back together. It turned out that I was right. The small table and armchair really did create the perfect corner for relaxation. It wasn't a place to hang out with friends, but I didn't need that. I could be quite happy alone. I decided I'd had enough of the stress of my marriage for today, and frankly, for the whole week, and went to bed.